Okay, so we're going to give solo Mr. Irrelevant podcast a shot today. I had a few scheduling difficulties with getting everyone else on for this weekend. As you know, life happens. Obviously, we all have kind of things going on outside of recording this podcast every week, so that's understandable. I did try to get some other people on, but again, trying to dedicate a day, really one day out of the whole week to this every week, or as close to every week as possible, kind of gets tough. So you guys just got me today. This is going to be painful for me listening back to this in terms of me just hearing my voice and that's it. But I think it works today too, just because a few of these things have specifically to do about me that I'm going to talk about today. So let's get that out the way. So the first bit is actually an announcement. So I will be looking to start a separate podcast. I think I'm going to do everything through the Mr. Irrelevant channel because I don't feel like making another channel. The title of this one will be different than the Mr. Irrelevant podcast. But basically, I think the working title that I'm going to be going with is Foster the Conversation. And so what this is going to be is basically I'm going to be going around to many of my friends and family and just having a one-on-one conversation. And essentially the conversation is going to consist of is basically just, whoever I'm having this conversation with, the areas of things that they are either, really proficient in or really knowledgeable, and me getting to learn about, something that they know a lot about, and that's something that I, may not encounter every day, or just anything. Really, honestly, it really is just a conversation. And obviously I want some learning to kind of take place in it. I don't think it's too dissimilar to a lot of things that are out nowadays where, again, it's kind of just like a one-on-one conversation. I really hesitate to call it an interview because it's not really that. It's, again, honestly, just me sitting down with somebody, learning about what, they have to share. And I think hopefully also us both kind of learning about something that we've either wanted to know or what have you. And I think the idea behind it is really just to encourage, whoever it is that I'm having this conversation with to really explore, creativity. I really want to put a lot of how everything looks when it gets broadcast out to them. So obviously for Mr. Relevant Podcast, I come up with the name of each episode and then the little artwork that goes into the YouTube video. And so obviously I would want the person who I'm having the conversation with to take on that for I guess their episode. And I think it should be really cool. I've gotten to talk to a few people about it, and it sounds like something that a lot of people would be interested in. So if you're listening to this, just expect a Facebook inbox message, a text message, a Twitter direct message, because I think this is really going to be kind of any and everybody, and even people who, I haven't spoken to in a long time. I've just seen a lot of really creative things and a lot of really cool things that people are doing, and I think being able to have a platform to put that out there is going to be really cool, and I really look forward to it. And it's kind of funny that I'm even recording Mr. Irrelevant solo today, because I think that's part of where I think Foster the Conversation is going to be really good, in the sense that I'll be able to just go to people and I won't have to battle with Skype or anything like that. It'll just be me, this other person, my laptop, my microphone, and we're gonna do it. So I'm hoping to get the first episode up next weekend. And obviously there'll be more details on that. But again, if you're listening to this, be on the lookout for that. Can't obviously tell you when that'll be because I haven't necessarily drawn up a whole breakdown of it. But again, I'm really looking forward to it and all that. The one thing that is a rule for that podcast, if you will, is that it won't. I'll try not to have anything to do with sports because I do want it to be different than the Mr. Relevant podcast. The Mr. Relevant podcast is where, again, we talk about sports and, sports is an analogy to society. And while that's certainly my MO, again, I think the point of this podcast and this podcast being different is that it, isn't really going to be about me as much as it's going to be about the person who I'm having the conversation with and them and their interests and the things that they are knowledgeable about. So that's that. The second piece that I think solely kind of pertains to me here is, so we'll see at the end of this if I wind up naming this episode Target Premium. But basically I had a back and forth with someone on Twitter, and to kind of speed through what that was about, Benjamin Albright on Twitter, I think it was Benjamin Albright, had a tweet out that said, or maybe it was, I don't know, whatever. If it was him, if it was Benjamin Albright, it was him. If it wasn't, I don't know, but I'm saying it's you now. So whatever. Had a tweet out that said that Michael Thomas was like the greatest wide receiver out now or something like that, and it's not remotely close. So I replied, Mike Evans, ? Now, again, that's all I said in my reply. So obviously I didn't get to fully flesh out what I was saying there, but my issue with the tweet wasn't that he said that Michael Thomas was great, but it was just the question of remotely close. So I don't think that Mike Evans is better than Michael Thomas, but I think it's a lot closer than remotely. So actually some other gentleman and had kind of replied back and had a link to his article he wrote. And basically, to sum up the article, it was this very sabermetrics-y type of article that had all these different, I guess you'd call them metrics or measurables, I'm not sure, that essentially takes stats and tries to, stats and splits, puts them together and puts this nice little bow and arrow, puts this nice little bow on them and then calls it something, spicy, and then says, all right, this explains everything. So I'm not going to read all of that. I'm not even going to go to the Twitter thing to find this guy's name. But basically, where I thought that this was a thing is I wanted to kind of explain, and this is good that I'm getting to do this by myself because I didn't want to, bore kind of, my co-hosts with, talking about this. But there's a difference between, so again, what I kept telling the guy was that this is missing context. And I guess the big thing that I want to bring out here and explain about football is that with baseball, there's a lot of individual attributes and things like that you can put to something. It's a batter, usually that, and I guess pitchers as well, but, each ballpark is different. You got some ballparks that favor hitters, you have some ballparks that favor pitchers, and in baseball where there's 162 games, you're facing all these pitchers multiple times throughout your career, throughout a season. Sabermetrics works in baseball, especially when it's just you and that's it, and you're not reliant on other things. My issue with it in football and with this gentleman's article, and he got in his feelings so bad because I shit on the article, and then I didn't realize that he wrote the article, which is why he kept coming back at me like really harsh. I don't apologize for shitting on the article because I thought it was stupid. Stupid's harsh, but again, I guess I'm trying to explain here my issues with the article. And again, it's about sabermetrics and the fact that I don't think sabermetrics fits into football, because football is reliant on so many things, so many other things. If you're a wide receiver, yes, there's separation, there's route running, there's, your ability to bring in both easy catches and, hard catches. But the quarterback's throw and where that is important. The offensive line blocking to give the quarterback time so that the pass can be delivered, either giving you time to go to a ball that may be thrown ahead of you, or, giving you time to complete the route that you're running. There's so much that relies on other things in order for you to do your job. Again, as people say, it's the ultimate team game. So when this gentleman puts out, I don't think it was target premium, but that's the only phrase that I remember from his tweets. This metric, and then you tell me that the metric excludes QB play, and then you sit here and try to tell me that you have this way that you can just measure what the receiver's doing without the quarterback involved. You've already lost me, because that doesn't make sense. There's a difference when you have Drew Brees throwing a football to you than when you have Sage Rosenfels throwing a football to you. And so, again, and with a pass, sure, you can go look at a scoreboard at the end or a stat sheet at the end and look at, yards after catch or something like that. But where in all of those stats does it tell you, hey, well, the quarterback threw a shit ball that the receiver had to adjust to, and he still made the catch, but he didn't get any yards after contact because he had to spend so much time adjusting to this ball. So, for example, and I hope I don't lose too many people with this example here, but it's like if the receiver's running a slant route, and so the receiver runs a slant route, the receiver beats the corner. So that means the corner is behind the receiver. And basically, let's say, I don't know, the safety's kind of out of the picture or whatever. So if the quarterback has enough time to deliver the pass the way it's supposed to be, then the pass is going to be in front of the receiver, which is going to allow the receiver to catch the ball where the corner's already behind him. And all he has to do is just run. And that's his yards after contact, right? So that's a position, or that's a scenario where everything is going right here. Now, my whole point about QB play being important and other things involved with the quarterback being important around that in terms of how you judge the receiver is, now, let's say there's a blitz coming. The receiver, who's already in stride, has to turn around and go to catch the football. And by the time the receiver does that, if the ball gets there, the receiver's going to be tackled because the ball was behind them. The play was set up so that the receiver could just get the ball in stride and go. But if you have to turn around and catch the ball, and I'm just reading the box score or whatever at the end of the game, that's not going to tell me what happened in that play. So, yeah, I mean, again, and that's not to say that sabermetrics or that there's no home for advanced statistics when it comes to football, because I think there is, but I think football requires so much more context about what's happening in each play than in sports like, basketball or hockey, where, especially because those sports have guys playing both sides, where you have something like plus minus, and maybe you can do a little bit more, sabermetrics, advanced statistics. And so, yeah, I don't think I'm going to name this episode Target Premium. But, again, that's just kind of my 2 cents on that whole thing. And I don't expect that guy to listen to this, and I'm not going to be petty, even more petty than I was being in that back and forth, and send it to him. But I just wanted to kind of say that, that piece about, advanced statistics and everything. Okay. So on to the actual topics that I had for today. Okay, so the big thing that I think that happened between my last time recording and why I actually wanted to put this out, despite, not having a co-host for this week, is Vontae Davis. So Vontae Davis is a cornerback who, I guess, formerly played for the Buffalo Bills this season. Also played for the Colts, is the little brother of what I would imagine to be definitely Hall of Fame, or at least, Pro Bowl, All-Pro tight end Vernon Davis. This is his little brother. And so my man Vontae made news because he quit on his team at halftime of the game that they had, I guess, what is now 2 weeks ago? Well, so this is Sunday. They lost today. Last Sunday, they won by a lot. So 3 games ago, whatever. And he's gotten a lot of slack, and I think I can understand where people are angry from a standpoint of everyone else, all his teammates are in the trenches, are, getting beat up in terms of, injuries and playing through, pain and things like that. And so it's kind of like, how dare you walk out on this thinking that you're too good for this when I'm sitting here doing the same thing. I'm doing this for you. I think that's a big part of, football camaraderie, is that, you're doing all this, you're taking all this punishment, not necessarily just so much for you and your family and your career and your salary and stuff like that, but for the guy next to you. Your, offensive linemen, they're blocking and putting themselves at, in harm to protect the quarterback from being sacked, to protect, to run block for the running back to get more yards, to, pass block for receivers or something like that. So again, everything that these guys are doing in terms of their health isn't so much as just for them, but it's for their teammates to go out and ball and to have success. So I do understand that piece of it. And I think that that's a point, and I think that the people in that locker room have a right to feel the way that they feel. I think you're definitely going to see moving forward with CTE and with, everything that's going on with the NFL in terms of pain management. So the battle that's going on right now with marijuana and, not only football, but, basketball and stuff like that, where these guys are trying to get marijuana used as, or viewed as an actual, pain management, remedy versus just popping all these, strong prescription medicine, pills, and then having all the issues that come with that, including addiction to those things. And, I'm sure whatever that does to your, to your body, that isn't good to be just solely relying on that. And then what happens, again, after you retire and you have all these aches and pains and, your body, you may be 30, 35 years old, but, physically your body is something like that of a 60, 70-year-old. And so, again, I'm not too surprised if you're going to see in the future that a lot of guys do kind of take a very selfish point of view of it, because it's like, they're probably going to reach a point like Vontae Davis reached, where they're like, why am I doing this? Is this worth it to me? Like, I get that my teammates are going to be upset, and that's fine, but am I going to feel that much better being able to walk away from the game while I can still walk, while I still feel some bit of okay, versus, pushing it one more year or pushing it another year or whatever, and maybe I'm 10 times in worse shape after that. And I think that that's certainly a really big thing too when you look at the NFL and you look at how the NFL is responding to things like what Kaepernick is, has been protesting about. And, a lot of players who are still in the NFL who are protesting about, where I think it starts to come out as, if you as a organization can't invest in me and invest in the things that I care about and allow me to use this platform, allow me to use this thing that I'm putting my body on the line for, then I'm out. Because I do think in some way it has to be a symbiotic relationship. I think a lot of people who are against the kneeling and anthem protesting really always seem to take this approach where they're like, oh, well, you signed a contract and, the team needs you and shit like that. But then these people don't say anything, or these people will give Vontae Davis shit for retiring at halftime, but won't say anything about a team cutting a guy, or a team, trying to lowball a guy like what we have with, Le'Veon Bell. They'll criticize Le'Veon Bell for, and let me turn that off. They'll criticize Le'Veon Bell for, sitting out and trying to get, what he feel is his worth in terms of money, especially a guy who plays the position that gets beat up the most in running back. But again, these people don't give these teams any slack or any bail, or whatever the saying is that I'm butchering right now, for doing basically the same thing. But we let it go under the guise that, oh, well, they're doing what's best for the organization. Well, why can't these players do what's in the best interest of them, and that be viewed in the exact same way that you're letting the team get away with that, or you're letting the league get away with looking out for, quote unquote, their best interests? So I think it needs to be both ways, especially as people, and people being us fans, who don't live the lives of these guys, who don't have to, concern ourselves or worry about how much pain these guys are in, or, who don't have to understand all the rehab and the work and stuff like that it takes to even just get ready for another season. I mean, when you look at the CTE stuff, you got guys who have very serious, I guess, what's the word? Versions, or not versions, but very serious, like, CTE symptoms, yet they either, like, haven't been in the league nearly as long as, a Tom Brady or something like that, or you just wouldn't imagine that, they've taken that much, brain trauma, and it isn't necessarily a correlation between number of concussions or things like that. I mean, even just any bit of head contact at all. I mean, look at a guy like Aaron Hernandez, who was only in the league for, 5 or so years. It was, 26, 27, if even that. When everything happened with him, and again, you saw the CTE that he had, and so, but then there could be a guy who's spent 15 or so years in the league, and his brain may not show as severe, kind of signs of CTE. So again, I mean, I guess I see both sides of it, but as a human, I can't, give Vontae too much hell for, looking out for his well-being and his health, because, his teammates aren't going to be there for him when, he needs somebody to help him out of bed, or to, pick up a cup of water to drink or some shit like that. So Vontae, I hope you still feel that you made the right decision. I think the fact that, he's willing to give up that much money and this contract that he just signed a few months ago, in terms of really believing in this decision to walk away from this game, then I have no other right than to side with him on that because I don't know what it took for him to get ready for the season. I don't know how close he was to deciding to retire before the year and just saying, hey, fuck it, I'll just give it another go. So again, I'm not going to be one of the people giving him too much hell for it. I get, people who feel like they relied on him, but the one person who doesn't feel that way is whoever was his backup, who's like, yo, I get to eat now. Now I get to play and hopefully show my skill set and, put myself in a position to where maybe I get a contract extension from this team and be able to make a lot more money for myself than I would have if, Vontae Davis had played the whole year and I had barely gotten, much of any playing time and whatever. Okay. Next up, I don't even know that I want to spend too much time on this, especially because as I'm recording this, the game, I don't even think I can call it a game, but the match between the slaughter that the Chicago Bears put on my dearest Tampa Bay Buccaneers have certainly changed this conversation, but I had on here to talk about Jameis and Ryan FitzMagic and just a lot of the back and forth that's been going on about that in terms of what the Buccaneers should do, whereas you had a guy in Fitzpatrick who had put up the numbers that he did, the first quarterback in NFL history to have 3 400-yard games consecutively, and I think he had 4 touchdowns in 2 games and 3 touchdowns in 1. And so now coming into this game, basically Fitzpatrick started. The team overall looked abysmal in the first half. And basically the Buccaneers wound up inserting Jameis back into the lineup. And so it seems like now going into the bye week next week and then Atlanta after that it'll be Jameis kind of moving forward. But that essentially was what was going to be my take anyway, is that even if you felt that Ryan was going to have this type of performance or at least be able to keep the team in these games the way he did in the first 3 games, if you decide to go with him and you bench Jameis for the rest of the year, then what does that do? So then you're essentially kind of giving up on this guy that you've so far have said is your franchise guy, which means that now he's going to want to go elsewhere. And if you don't have him, Ryan is 35 years old. So you're going to need another quarterback. The one thing about Fitzpatrick is that this is his 7th or 8th team in his career, and I think he came into the league in 07 or 06 or something like that. And so for 10 to 12 years of his career to be on 8 teams, I mean, he's still in the NFL because he's shown some flashes. He's shown stuff like, well, not quite to this level, but he's shown flashes of being able to put it all together. But then what's happened is that he's had games just like this first half of the game against Chicago. And that's what's always led to him not being truly given the keys and, having a real shot at being a team's franchise guy. As a Buccaneers fan, I do thank him for all the times he stepped in. I mean, if you consider this game to be, a start for him, and obviously the result to go to him is now 4-3 as a starter, or just coming into games, I guess. Well, no, as a starter, 4-3, which isn't that bad as a backup. And I guess the only thing to say about this topic now moving forward is that I hope that the Buccaneers do hold on to him even past this year. I think that a guy who has a good relationship with Jameis hopefully can play even more of a mentor role to a young guy, not only as a quarterback, but as a father, Jameis just became a father over the off season, and can really help keep a guy that has a lot of potential, focused on football and, focused on, his family, football, and keeping his head out of, trouble. I won't talk about the Buccaneers right now because I'm still angry. The only thing I'll say about this Bears game is that I hope that performance is what, finally is the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of getting Mike Smith fired. And with that, we are moving on to the next topic. Okay, so on to some basketball. Well, wait, before basketball, forgot about this. So there was some news here about, talking about rights and a little bit of the conversation that, I was having with you all about Vontae Davis and just all these things that the players need to start keeping in mind for themselves as it relates to their football careers. Well, it appears that the Hall of Fame, I guess, committee or just some type of union-ish of Hall of Famers have come together, headlined by Eric Dickerson. So, okay, I'm reading here. This is via Sporting News, that Eric Dickerson is the chairman of what is, I guess, a newly created Hall of Fame board. And I guess their first kind of business is trying to get this sense of, starting with the Hall of Famers, I guess, get this sense of forcing the NFL's hand in securing, I guess, some sort of salary and just benefits and all types of like health care for former players. And Eric Dickerson did a bunch of rounds on, TV explaining himself, which I thought was brave of him, especially where there was a lot of criticisms of it, where people really took to heart that this needed to start with the Hall of Famers, feeling like you want to do this for the Hall of Famers, but where is the sense of this actually getting to trickle down to everyone else? And that it's not fair for you to have to be a Hall of Famer to get this. And I do agree with that, because who's to say that once you fight so hard for the Hall of Famers to get it, how long then does it take for everyone else to get it? And then on top of that, where's the cutoff? Because obviously the NFL isn't going to just sign away to do this for every single guy, because what's the difference? I mean, to them, there's not going to be needing to invest that same level of care, I guess, into a guy who, was just on a practice squad, or a guy that, maybe only had a 2-year career and then retired, or, was a guy who was like a 4th string tight end and, barely got any, real playing time or things like that. I do think in the wake of everything that's going on, and again, what I was saying about Vontae Davis and everything that NFL players right now have to face and battle up against, and then also with Le'Veon Bell. So it's not just a health bit in terms of, CTE and all these other injuries, but it's also the fact that there's no, fully guaranteed contracts in the NFL. And the idea that for, running backs are kind of the main guys in the sense of, that they get underpaid essentially for how much they're relied upon and how much, physical toll is being taken on them. I think this is something that's necessary, but I do think that it's good that Eric Dickerson went around and kind of got to hear all this stuff, not just from, analysts and stuff, but a lot of these people who are former players who, can look at it and as a former player say, I really love this, but here's my kind of 2 cents on where you can tighten this up. And so I'll definitely keep an eye on this, because I think that this is in the ballpark of something that should definitely be a thing that has pressure along it on the NFL to, do more for their former players, because the NFL doesn't want this. They don't want. I mean, that's why you see, all these penalty flags so far this year with, all the roughing the passer calls and these helmet to helmet things. They're doing this because they want to try to cut down on the amount of times that they're sued by former players. So this is their way to make it seem as if they care about the players, when it's not. If anything, they're looking at it like, well, I want to protect you from yourself, aka I want to protect me from being sued by you down the line, by saying, well, you can go look at the tape. We made sure that we protected them by calling flags on every little tiny hit that, this guy could potentially say led to him getting a concussion or led to him getting, CTE. So again, definitely something that I will keep in mind. But again, we'll see what happens with this. I don't know that I feel that this should be something that's just for Hall of Famers, only because I don't know how long then it'll take for that to get to, the guys who are playing now, or how long it'll take for a guy who is a Hall of Famer, but, he may not actually get into the Hall of Fame for another, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And would it be too late by that time? So again, definitely something to keep an eye out on. Okay. So the last thing that I am going to touch on here, and I do have some topics that, again, I'm going to save for, when we have other people, if the statute of limitations on those topics hasn't expired. But Jimmy Butler. Man. Okay, so there's been a lot of drama with that. Basically, Jimmy has requested a trade from the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I think for people who've been on Twitter and have just been kind of keeping an eye out on this, people who listen to various basketball podcasts, you've heard a lot of rumblings about Jimmy Butler and him potentially going elsewhere when he becomes a free agent, because, I mean, Minnesota so far hasn't been able to materialize, with the young potential that they've had in Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, especially because, number one, they're young, but number two, they're in a very stacked Western Conference with very little experience. And number three, I don't think Jimmy Butler is all that good as the head guy, but we're gonna save that. And so, I mean, obviously, it's no surprise that he wants to go elsewhere, but the timing of all this is pretty nuts. And so there's a bunch of rumors, I guess they call them, in terms of trying to be not too messy and journalistic in some way, shape, or form. There was some rumors about him sleeping with Karl Anthony Towns' girl, and I guess Karl finding out and then going to Minnesota's brass and saying, I can't play with this guy. Obviously, from everything that kind of transpired after the trade demand, there's some issues there with Andrew Wiggins, as once this news got out there, Andrew Wiggins' older brother had tweeted out hallelujah, which led to Jimmy Butler making this like Instagram video of him training, and then him getting up to the top of the hill and saying like hallelujah, like you better keep that same energy, which then led to Steven Jackson getting involved in it, and then Andrew Wiggins responding to Steven Jackson, which is problems that Andrew Wiggins does not want. I think since then, the Andrew Wiggins, Steven Jackson thing has been squashed, thanks to Stackhouse. But man, this has been nuts. I mean, obviously Minnesota needs to look at this in terms of trying to get back something of value or something of value from their book on Jimmy Butler, and the trades that they're going to be receiving, at least early on, are not, even for Jimmy Butler standards, are not going to be good enough because, I mean, you're going to throw out something, light to see if you can get Minnesota to bite. Because in your mind, as another team trying to throw this trade out there, you're looking at how tense the situation is and saying, well, they can't keep him there for that long. I mean, the season's going to start up in about a week or two. And so the longer he's around that team, the longer he's, I mean, not physically in the locker room, but part of that team, the, more tension and the more drama that creates for the guys who are there, especially, your two main guys now, and Carl and Andrew, who were directly involved in this, and just how, that might kind of keep them or get them off their game, at least until this is, solved and he has been traded away. I've said kind of, off the record or off air to, a bunch of my friends and talking about this, that I don't know that I believe that Jimmy Butler is good enough to be what Minnesota had him as and what he was in Chicago for a little bit of being the main guy. He is good defensively. He, has, gotten better as an offensive piece as well. But I think at best he's the third option on a team that's loaded. He's if anything, his best option is being, the Chris Bosh or the Kevin Love to a team that already has two All-Stars. And the teams that he gave Minnesota as options that he wanted were the Clippers, the Knicks, and the Nets. And obviously the Clippers are trying to angle to get Kawhi Leonard to come on over after this year when he's a free agent. So you look at that and you look at some of the pieces they have, and, that might be interesting if they're able to pull that off and have Kawhi and Jimmy, and then maybe also, again, kind of angle to get another, superstar in there if they have the, the space to be able to do that. Then you have the Knicks and the Nets, where there was rumors of Jimmy and Kyrie talking about joining forces on one of those two New York teams that certainly both of them have the money to be able to, pay those two guys. And again, maybe even, I think the Nets definitely have the money, for a third All-Star as well. But again, I think those teams especially, have to ask themselves if he's worth that. If, this is a guy that you give max money to, or a guy you should give max money to, especially when you take into account that there's other free agents who are going to be out there, like Kevin Durant, that you may want to try to lure as well. And, speaking of, there's been rumors about Kevin Durant going to the Knicks, and that being potentially a done deal. There's rumors of Kevin Durant going to the Lakers to be with LeBron. And that's another thing. The Lakers is also an option too. I mean, all those guys that they signed were mostly like 1 year guys. So, I mean, that team could look completely different next year. And again, the Clippers are angling for Kawhi. I mean, I don't know that's out of, that the door has been shut on Kawhi going to the Lakers. I know, San Antonio didn't, and seemed as if they were pretty steadfast on not trading Kawhi to, their conference rival. And instead they shipped him to the East. But again, I mean, we just heard Kawhi talk and laugh for the first time, in his press conferences, his introductory press conferences. I can't speak today. With the Raptors. And so again, we don't know what he's going to decide to do. But the one thing about Jimmy Butler and these trade requests is that, all these guys who have done this so far of late, the Paul Georges, the Kyrie Irvings, Kawhi Leonard, where these are guys who are coming into free agency and saying to these teams that they're not going to resign and that they want to be traded. I mean, if you look at it, none of them have gotten traded to the teams that they had on their list. I mean, Boston wasn't on Kyrie's list of teams. Oklahoma City wasn't on Paul George's list of teams, and the Toronto Raptors were not on Kawhi Leonard's list of teams. And I think you're going to see too that, I mean, professional sports as a whole is really just a copycat league. So, you watch Oklahoma City take a gamble and bet on themselves that, they'll send some pieces over to get Paul George in hopes that once Paul George is here, then maybe he actually doesn't want to leave. And for a guy who was hooting and hollering about, I'm going to LA to be a Laker, I'm going to LA, I'm going to LA, I don't even think he gave the Lakers a meeting and before he wound up re-signing with the Thunder. I think personally I would like to see that happen with Kawhi and Toronto, just because I think this being Kawhi's team, which it'll certainly be now that DeMar isn't there, now that Dwayne Casey isn't there, and that Toronto isn't one of those franchises that are known for something else besides just the players they have. In San Antonio, that is, Tim Duncan's team. That's before Tim Duncan. That's Greg Popovich's team. And so I can understand for a guy that I guess wants that acclaim and wants to have everything be on him, that now you're in a city where that's the case. And especially for a guy like Kawhi who doesn't talk, I think Toronto's the perfect place because, I mean, he's going to go to LA and suddenly turn into LeBron in terms of being a central figure who was always out in front and having these commercials and being this very marketable presence. No, I don't think that that's the case. But Toronto is obviously being the only international basketball team in the NBA, a global city, and I think you have a perfect mixture of a team that doesn't have all that much attention, but also all of the spotlight as well. And so I hope they do well. I hope he decides to stay. And, and even with Jimmy Butler, it seems he's already kind of changed his mind. And there's been rumors about now Miami is, his preferred destination. So some guy had came into this gym that Jimmy Butler was playing in and tried to prank him and say that he got traded to the Kings. And it didn't seem like it worked, but I mean, that could be pretty relevant. I mean, again, Minnesota doesn't owe him to send him anywhere. The only thing that they need to look out for is them. And these guys try to create the leverage in the sense of scaring away teams that they don't want to go to by saying, well, I'm not going to sign long term here. But, I mean, if these teams feel like they want to take that gamble and they, want to take the risk to say, well, if you really feel like you're going to want to leave, then let's see if you really still feel that way a year from now when you got to make that decision. So with the season coming up, we'll see where Jimmy Butler lands. I personally don't think the Knicks should give up much of anything, especially if, they're being linked to Kyrie, especially if they're being linked to Kevin Durant. You already, have Porzingis. If he really wants to go there, then again, that'll be an option that he exercises when he is a free agent. The Clippers, maybe you pull the strings to get him, but I mean, you don't know what Kawhi is going to do. And is Jimmy Butler going to be enough in terms of if you get him and no one else comes? Are you still going to be happy with that and what you gave up to get him? And I don't know. The Nets, I think they could just use anything right now. But Nets, this is what you get for leaving New Jersey. I hope you continue to be a shit team. So again, we'll definitely keep tabs on that too, and hopefully by one of our future episodes of the Mr. Relevant podcast, we will kind of share the results of where he winds up, and we'll see if let me see if I can make a little prediction here where he goes. I don't think I can, just because again, I don't think the places he wants to go teams care about, or the Timberwolves care about. I did see that, I guess Portland was, and I don't want him. I do not want him. Neil O'Shea, I know you're listening to the Mr. Relevant podcast. I don't want him, so please don't do that to me. I feel like he should go to like the Magic. I feel like the Magic should do this. Like, I don't even know if they need a 2 or a 3, but like, I feel like for you demanding to be traded, like, I think I would be petty enough if I was the Timberwolves GM to be like, all right, you're going to Orlando. Like, but as I've already talked a lot longer than I intended to with this just being myself, I am going to dipset and continue watching football, right, Meow? And again, next week, I think we should get everybody. I will be home, so Dwa and Jamal, I'm pulling up. And by pulling up, I mean somebody's going to have to give me a ride because I won't have my car. But I will catch you all next week, even if it has to be just me, because your boy is paying for Mixler now, and the content will be happening. And again, also, stay, keep your eyes glued out for Foster the Conversation, as that will be coming too. Peace.